Since 1984, Sawyer has existed to support your wildest adventures. Learn about their advanced insect repellents and family of technical lightweight water filters at Sawyer.com.
Welcome to Wellness in the Wilderness. Come with us on the trail of life as we inspire you to take a step outdoors, to disconnect from the distractions and reconnect with yourself. Sydney Williams and her guests will motivate you to get active and get well. Now, here is Sydney.
All right, everybody, welcome to Wellness in the Wilderness. I'm your host, Sydney Williams, author and founder of Hiking My Feelings, and today I am broadcasting live from the ancestral lands of the Kumeyaay people, now known as Julian, California. Whether you're an experienced outdoor enthusiast or brand new to the healing power of nature, we hope that these conversations will inspire you to think differently about your relationship to nature and equip you with the tools, rituals, and knowledge to help you bring your best self to life, love, and work. At the very least, we hope that you'll take this time each week to do something kind for yourself while you listen, and that these conversations feel like a breath of fresh air. Are you loving the music for the show as much as I am? Because we are super grateful to be able to use this unreleased track from our buddy Levesque featuring Man of the Forest on violin. So be sure to check out both of them on Spotify and stay tuned for Levesque's upcoming album in 2023. Now, about our guest today. Anna Levesque is a distinguished leader in the outdoor industry for whitewater kayak instruction. What differentiates Anna is her approach to physical and mental well-being and how this is tied to success on the water and in life. She leads, inspires, and coaches her clients on the self-leadership required to live a healthy, confident, and adventurous life, and is a sought-after speaker and facilitator for empowering leaders in the outdoor industry. Among her many accomplishments and accolades, Anna was named one of the most inspirational paddlers alive by Canoe and Kayak magazine, voted the most inspirational outdoors person by Blue Ridge Outdoors magazine, and is the author of the book Yoga for Paddling. She has paddled, taught, and competed on the international stage for close to 30 years and is passionate about empowering her clients with courage and confidence through her company, Mind Body Paddle. Today, we're going to be chatting about how a decision she made in college wasn't just a phase. In fact, it led to the life of her dreams, a career, and a community. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Thanks, Sydney. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. So let's jump right into it. You've been paddling for close to 30 years. And before we get into what you do today, let's take a little trip down memory lane. How did you get started with paddling?
So I got started when I was a sophomore in college and I was looking for a summer job. And I was not outdoorsy at all at the time. And I was walking around my hometown. I grew up in between Ottawa and Montreal in Canada. I was at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So I was home for the summer. And I was looking for regular, office summer jobs. So I was dressed, quote unquote, professionally, and I wasn't having any luck. So I decided to go knock on the door of a local whitewater rafting company. And knowing what I know now about the outdoor industry, I'm sure they were questioning, like, who is this girl and dressed up as a professional, wanting a summer job. And they told me that there was no availability to be a raft guide. That was what I was really interested in. I wasn't outdoorsy, but I did grow up alpine ski racing and I did like cycling. And so they told me, well, we don't have a job for you in guiding, but you can work in the kitchen. And I don't know, it's just, just in the moment, something inside myself was like, sure, I'll work in the kitchen. The most unglamorous job, right? And that's when I started working in the kitchen. I was introduced to a whole new world to me. For me, it was a whole new world. This world of folks who prioritized joy, who prioritized doing what they love, who prioritized being in nature and community, instead of what I grew up with, which was go to college, get an education, get a job, buy a house, have a car, have a family, et cetera, et cetera. And it really blew my mind. And so I fell in love.
I love that. And I think that there's already a lesson. It's like, when you know what you want and you're interested in it, sometimes you got to take the position that might not have been your first choice, but get your foot in the door. So good on you. I love that. One of the things that you said that really stuck out to me was, it sounds like you, very much like myself, were kind of given an outline, a driveway, a runway, a river, if you will, now that we're in paddle sports, of what life should look like. So you're in college, summer job, you love it. What did your parents think?
They were unsure at first. And they totally were like, okay, for sure, summer job, no worries. I was, content, and I wasn't getting into trouble. So, and I was being introduced to, the first time I went whitewater rafting, I was like, this is amazing. So I was really happy. And, ultimately my parents they want me to be happy. The resistance didn't come when it was my first summer job. It was when it was the second summer job. And then when I said, you know what, instead of pursuing law school, I want you all to drop me off at a rafting company in West Virginia after graduation so I can become a full-time raft guide.
I love this. I love this so much. When I went skydiving for the first time in 2005, I landed and I was like, I'm going to be an instructor someday. And my parents were like, you're going to college. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. So second, third, now they're dropping you off. One of the things that is really interesting to me about this, because now we know this was a summer job. Your parents thought this might be a phase. You were like, nope, I need you to drop me off at a rafting company. Yeah. You've been paddling for close to 30 years now. So what inspired you to keep going? What was it about that first summer that led to the next summer that led to you deciding that law school was not for you on the waters where you want to be? Walk me through that.
Like I said, the first time I went whitewater rafting, it's hard to describe, right? It's hard to put into words. There was such a joy that emanated and a connection. And as a child, I always loved going for walks in the woods. I always loved being in nature, even just being outside in, our backyard. And then being on the river was so joyful and powerful. The river is so powerful. I just was drawn to it, very strong draw. And then again, the community was full of joy. There was a lot of joy and people feeling fulfilled and people having agency over what was important to them in life. And as opposed to people being stuck in jobs that they can't stand and complaining and not feeling like they have agency. And that's what really drew me, that agency of, yes, their life is full of possibility and opportunity. If I look outside of my box, like you said, that, that river, that path that was laid out for you, if I look outside of that, there is so much more. And that was really inspiring and motivating to me. So that's what kept me going. And then I was able to travel around the world, raft guiding, eventually, and meeting new people. And I think one of the things, I studied abroad in Chile in South America, my senior year in college. And that was after I'd been working at the rafting company in Quebec. And because the paddle sports world is small, I got connected with a Chilean raft guide, and he introduced me to rivers and a whole new community in Chile that was connected by a love of the river. And I remember being out in southern Chile in the beautiful night sky, in hot springs, just in wonderment of my life. Right. And the possibility of where this could go.
I love that sense of possibility. And I think that that's such a pivotal point. And I know that not everybody is fortunate enough to have that mindset or experience that opportunity to make a decision from a place of possibility. And I love what you're saying about joy being prioritized and community being prioritized. Leading up to this career in whitewater, was that an area that was lacking, or was that an area that you were looking just to find more of because now you know that there's more of it to be had?
The joy, you mean? Are you talking about the joy? Can you rephrase that question for me?
Yeah, for sure. So for the joy and the community part that really drew you into the whitewater community, was that facet of your life that you had in place and you just wanted more of it? Or was that lacking and this was kind of filling that need?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I felt like I could show up. This is going to sound contradictory maybe for where this conversation is going, but I did feel that at a basic level, I could show up just as I was in the whitewater community and find that joy versus having to look a certain way or act a certain way. In the beginning, I definitely felt, so I had communities, and yet I always felt that I didn't maybe fully belong, but I felt like I belonged in the whitewater community right from the start.
It sounds like it's almost like once you got out of the clothes that weren't for you and getting all dressed up and going to outdoor industry jobs, it sounds like once you took off the clothes literally and like proverbially the mask of a lady that's like trying to fit her way into a box she's not meant to fit into, that you could like literally and metaphorically let your hair down. Yes?
Yes. What's funny is I can remember what I was wearing walking into the rafting company, like really nice pants, heels, a nice shirt. And the folks who were interviewing me were in Patagonia river shorts and t-shirts, you know.
You're like, I'm way overdressed, but also I found my people and I don't normally wear these clothes. Like I'd be much more comfortable in the whitewater shorts. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I'm recognizing there's a lot of synchronicities and parallels between how I got into skydiving back in the day and the emotions that gave me. Like I was in the thick of the beginning of the thick of my career. But skydiving for me was like that, going to the drop zone on the weekends, which was like, I don't have to wear business casual. I don't have to straighten my hair. Like it just really, I think there's something really special. And maybe that is a good question. Was there something about it where, is there a level of trust that you start to establish with your people on the water that makes those bonds and that community that much stronger on a more expedited time frame than perhaps normal friendships and relationships?
I think so, definitely, because you're in community on the river and you're facing challenges together and you've got to work as a team. And so regardless of, whatever you think of that person or whatever they said to you that maybe made you mad earlier, like you're a team on the river, right? And you're all getting down together and need to work together. So you set that aside. And I think that allows us to see different facets of people and also accept people fully, at least in those moments where we know we have to work together.
I would agree with that 100%. And something that you said earlier that I think is pretty interesting is at first you were like, oh, like I feel like I can be myself. And then what happened? Because it sounds like just, representation matters. And from what I've seen in the limited exposure that I have to the whitewater world, there's a lot of dudes out there. So what's the gender split? Is this a mostly male dominated sport?
Yes, whitewater kayaking is a male-dominated sport, and it has been since it began. I would say there's a lot more female participation now, which is fantastic. So I love your question. And then I started getting called the kitchen wench. That was my nickname that the guides called me, right? Because I worked in the kitchen. None of them believed that I would ever get into paddling. Like I said, I wasn't that outdoorsy, but I was athletic. And I started begging people to teach me how to kayak. And, none of them really gave me the time of day, except at that rafting company, and this was exceptional, the head of kayak school was a woman who encouraged me to kayak and allowed me to shadow her classes on my days off. So on the one hand, a lot of the guys, what I experienced is the guys were calling me kitchen wench and laughing about it. And they weren't really giving me the time of day to help me learn. And this amazing, powerful woman was like, yes, let's go, and she pushed me to have agency. She was like, yeah, get your stuff together. You can come with me, but you're going to help. And, all that good stuff. was very empowering.
Oh, I love that so much. So it sounds like there might be some inequities in the sport at some point in time. I mean, clearly we're going to get to what you're up to these days in the next couple segments, but what were some of the inequities you were seeing, and like, when did you know that this is something that you had to do something about?
The biggest inequity. So this is why I said it was a little bit of a contradiction earlier when I said I could show up as myself, because then at one point I realized that I could show up as myself as long as I molded to what the guys accepted in terms of being on the river, and what they accepted is their version of courage and brave and being a good paddler, which did not include showing emotion or talking about your nerves or being nervous. Like, being nervous was not acceptable. And crying or showing any type of emotion on the river was definitely not acceptable. It definitely meant that you shouldn't be out there. And I remember being in a competition. It was on the Russell Fork in Kentucky, and it was a race is a class 4 river. And at that time, it was a segmented competition. There were different facets to it. And we were paddling down to where the competition started, and I got stuck in a hole, which means I got recirculated in a feature. I ended up swimming out of my kayak. I was so mad. I paddled to shore. Like, I got back in, got my stuff together, got over to shore, dragged my kayak up into the woods, and bawled my eyes out for 10 minutes just by myself, because I knew I couldn't show any emotion. And then I came back down to shore, got in my boat after I felt complete with my, emotional, expressing my emotion. And I actually won the next segment of the competition. And that's when I realized, you know what? Emotion is not related to your performance, right?
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I'm sorry, did you just say that crying makes you win?
Yes. I did.
All right. So before we jump to break, we have been talking with Anna Levesque from Mind Body Paddle about how she got into paddling, what led to this amazing almost 30-year career she's had. And it sounds like a couple great things happened. One, she found a community that prioritized joy, love, their connection to nature, and the community itself. And with these inequities and with crying equal winning, when we get back, we're going to talk about what Hannah did to bring that inequity to life and flip it on its head and empower thousands of women on and off the water. We'll be right back.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
Have you ever spoken unkindly to yourself? Do you realize when you do? Are you ready to make changes, but find yourself completely paralyzed by the choices in front of you? We live in a hyper-connected, always-on world, and frankly, it's exhausting. Let's make time to disconnect from the distractions and reconnect with yourself. Hiking My Feelings exists to help people discover the healing power of nature. Kickstart your healing journey and grab a copy of the book that started our movement, Hiking My Feelings, Stepping into the Healing Power of Nature. Named one of Audible's best hiking audiobooks and available wherever books are sold. Visit hikingmyfeelings.org today to learn more.
Sawyer is more than an outdoor company. Every Sawyer product you buy contributes to our common humanity, bringing Sawyer water filtration systems to people in need all around the world. In just 2022 alone, 260,000 households in over 45 countries received clean drinking water through Sawyer filters. Over the past 10 years, we've teamed up with over 140 charities in 80 countries to provide long-term, sustainable relief, domestically, internationally, and in disaster situations. Together, we're saving millions of lives. Thank you.
Ready to find your wellness in the wilderness? Look no further than Hiking My Feelings. Through a combination of community and self-discovery, our programs are designed to give you the space and support to connect life's dots. If you're looking to figure out who you are underneath the stories you've been given and are ready to redesign the map of where you're headed with actionable steps and opportunities to dream big, we're here to walk alongside you. Whether you're a seasoned adventure enthusiast or brand new to the healing power of nature, we've got your back. Visit hikingmyfeelings.org today to download our free Trail Thoughts worksheets and learn more about Hiking My Feelings.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You're listening to Wellness in the Wilderness with Sydney Williams. Have a question for Sydney and her guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show with Sydney.
Welcome back to Wellness in the Wilderness. I'm still Sydney Williams, and I'm here with Anna from Mind Body Paddle. And before the break, we were talking about some of the inequities she was seeing in the sport and how she went on to win the next segment of a race after she cried in the woods to get her feelings out of her body. So Anna, let's jump right back in. What were some of the inequities you were seeing for yourself? Like when you came back and you won that race, was there any discussion? Did you tell people that you cried? Like what happened after that led you to start bridging these gaps and start creating more equity for women in whitewater?
Yeah, so I did start having conversations with my colleagues, pro female kayakers. And what's interesting is, to your question, I didn't talk about what happened at the race, with other people at the race. I kept that to myself because, at the time it felt embarrassing, even though now I'm like, that's super cool. And so I started having conversations, asking in private other female paddlers, do you ever get emotional on the river? What does that feel like? And honestly, it had come up before also in conversation. And the biggest thread was that a lot of women felt like they couldn't show up just as they are, that they had to keep up. I remember one of my friends had heard, if you have to scout, which means looking at a rapid, more than 5 seconds, then you shouldn't be paddling it, which is really ridiculous. And things like that. Or if you're too emotional, you shouldn't be on the water. Or I remember being told when I was running a really difficult river with a group and I was the only female, they said, look, if you're not going to run a rapid and you need to be at the bottom by the time we're done because we don't want to wait for you. And so can you imagine getting on a really challenging river that, has consequences, high consequences. You can get really hurt or worse. And you're instead of being supported and coached in a positive, confidence building way, you're being told you better keep up because we don't have to deal with you. And, my confidence would start spiraling. And then of course, when my confidence would start spiraling, now it's funny because at the race, I said, when I was able to fully let out my emotions, then I could have my confidence. But when I felt I wasn't able to express my emotions and I had to keep up and there was so much pressure, my confidence started spiraling and then my performance would start spiraling. And that was just a vicious circle. And, I wasn't the only woman who was experiencing this type of pressure. And of course, some women everyone's different. And so some folks are able to, deal with that better than others. But for me, it was really hard. It did not empower me to perform at my best. And that's when another conversation I had, one friend told me that, yes, she gets emotional, but she'd make sure that she'd let the guys paddle around the corner and then let it out and then paddle really fast to get back to them so they wouldn't notice. And that's an inequity because you have people who have so much pressure and they're being held to a different standard, and there's no one is trying to understand where they're coming from.
This brings up a lot of questions for me. So let's do this. And this might be more of like a rapid fire kind of situation here. But first things first, is there a standardized program for training to learn how to kayak competitively?
No. It's and when I'm talking about kayaking on harder rivers, that's not necessarily. There is extreme racing. Definitely, there's a few big extreme races in the U.S. But no, it's such a new sport, really. It started in the late 70s. People in the 70s and 80s were still making their own whitewater kayaks. So it's still relatively new. And so I would say no. And there aren't, coaches. In freestyle kayaking, there are starting to be coaches now, and there's starting to be this really great community of competitors that are coming together to empower each other. And that's really wonderful to see.
That sounds great and terrible at the same time. Great that they're empowering each other. Terrible that there's not a standardized program. Okay, so my next curiosity about this is, at any point when you were being coached, were you taught about mindset stuff? And was your coach female or male? Or was it a split between over the course of your career?
Oh, yeah. I was never coached. I never had a coach. And I'm very clear that would have been very helpful for me, which is why I have a coach now and why I coach people. So when I was competing, again, it was very new. And the paradigm at the time, again, so whitewater kayaking is a legacy sport, meaning it's easy to get into when you know someone who already does it, a family member, a friend, friends of the family, or you have you go out and seek out a job like I did in the industry and you learn that way. And so at the time, a lot of, I'm just going to be honest, a lot of the female competitors were being coached by their partners, by their boyfriends or husbands. And that is all. And so actually what's interesting is my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, I wanted that from him, but he was not interested. And that was, it was hard on our relationship. And that is just a terrible paradigm, right? Again, disempowering, that was the culture. And there was no one to step in, no coaches really available that I knew of anyways at the time.
Man, that is wild. Because I think about how you've had such a long career. I just assume this has been happening for forever. So newsflash, everybody listening, kayaking is a new thing. Like, it's been around, but to compete, to be at this level, to where mindset, what you're saying about difficulty of the water and the moves that you have to make and the pressures that are already there. Like, if you're already being expected to hurry up and get there, let alone like the physical stamina required to do this safely and successfully. If you're slowing down so you can experience the emotions and allow them to pass, and then paddling really fast so the guys don't know that you were just having an emotional experience, that's got to be hard to manage from a physical stamina standpoint too, I got to think.
Yeah, definitely. And so there's many different disciplines in whitewater kayaking. So at the Olympic level, there's slalom kayaking, and that is very standardized, and there's coaching. And that's not the type of competition I was doing. I was doing the extreme racing, which is racing over waterfalls and difficult rapids, and freestyle kayaking, which is in a feature. It's like surfing, and you have to do a routine and it's being judged. And then you go out in between the competitions and you're paddling, right, for fun. And a lot of this pressure was coming from when we were out with groups paddling for fun as well. So yeah, it's I just wanted to make that distinction.
Oh, I appreciate
for everyone
that.
Listening.
Yeah. And it's interesting that the pressure's coming not just in a competitive landscape, but also when you're just out there having fun. So, it's just pressure on pressure on pressure. So you had mentioned before the break that there was a woman who allowed you to shadow, and that kind of got you in there, and she gave you the agency to like decide what you wanted to do in the sport and kind of helped you move your way through it. And at the beginning of this segment, you were talking about speaking with other pro kayakers, other women that had experienced similar things. Is there anybody that you want to shout out that was someone that you could look up to, somebody who gave you guidance on how to navigate these inequities successfully at the time?
Oh, yes. Her name is Buffy Burge, and I still get to paddle with her. Not as often. She lives here in Asheville as well. And I was in Ecuador paddling a challenging river, and I hadn't paddled with her much before, but she was one of my, idols, because she was known for, and she still is known for, being an amazing paddler, paddling hard stuff. And on that river, I was newer to paddling. And so I flipped over several times. And my habit pattern is to be very hard on myself. I'm sure there are women out there, and maybe you can relate, Sydney.
Yep.
So I pulled over into an eddy, and I was having a little emotion, and Buffy came in, and I said, "Oh boy, I'm so embarrassed." And she was so great. She said, "You know what? I think you're doing great. And it's really important that you want to start focusing on the things you're doing well, because you're doing a lot of things well today." And that has always stuck with me. This was 20 some years ago. And, that just goes to show the power of having someone that will take the time to stop with you and give you a little pep talk and expecting. So here's my plug for coaching, right? Expecting a loved one or a friend or someone you don't know that well to do that for you. Yes, you'll have those moments where that will happen and it will be awesome. But that is to get that accountability and that coaching more often and on a, consistent basis, it's worth hiring someone. That's why I have a coach. And so that's my plug for coaching.
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, my skill set in skydiving skyrocketed the second I started coaching. My coach was my husband was my instructor, and then we ended up, he wasn't my husband at the time. I met my husband because he was my instructor. But yeah, I mean, coaching is the way to go. And I think on and off the water, that's the case. Like, that accountability, yes. Like, it's worth the investment in yourself to have that, because that is what a coach is there for. And we can't rely on the people we love and our friends and family on and off the water, on and off the trail, in and out of the sky, whatever your sport is, to do that for us. And when we have those expectations and people don't meet it, that can harbor resentment, and that leads to contempt, and then everything just kind of spirals from there. So I appreciate you calling that out specifically about coaching, because it is so, so valuable. One of the questions that I have to ask, it sounds like there might have been several moments or lots of different inequities, or you're witnessing these things and experiencing this discrimination, criticism, name calling, whatever, over the course of a period of time. Was there a specific instance or a special moment where you were like, this is it, I've had enough, how can I fix this?
Yeah, I was really having these conversations, and after the, dozens of conversations, I was like, I'm not the only one. And this isn't right that no one talks about what I would call the female experience in paddling. Now, I understand, I just want to put it out there. I realize that my experience is not all women's experience. At the time, though, there was the common thread going on of things I've already talked about in this interview. And so I actually reached out to a friend of mine who at the time was producing instructional DVDs for whitewater kayaking. And I went to him, he was a friend, and asked him, I said, what do you think of this idea? And I thought I was going to get a lot of resistance, but he was actually very supportive. And he said, well, if you can find the videographer and the sponsorship money, the funding to put it together, we'd be happy to help you publish and distribute. And so then I called up a videographer editor that I knew who had a lot of experience in the industry. And we got to sit down actually by the river, which was really sweet. And I told him my idea. I want to make an instructional DVD for women. I want to use it to put the female experience or some of these stories out into the world. And I want to make a segment that's titled, It's Okay to Cry on the River. And again, I thought that he would, put up a lot of resistance, but he didn't. And he was really excited about it even. And then the funding all fell into place. And Sydney, you might have had some experiences like this in your life where everything just falls into place so easily. I mean, you have to put effort. I had to work for it, but I just knew this was my calling. This is great. I'm going to produce this instructional DVD for women. I'm going to have women tell their stories, and I'm going to highlight strong female paddlers and paddling skills. I'm going to put it out there. So that was my first step to doing something about it.
I love that so much. And yes, my husband and I and our good friends, Taylor and Thor, who run a nonprofit called Do Good Shit. We call that the jet stream. When you get into it and it's just like, yeah, you got to keep taking steps. You got to keep putting that paddle in the water. You got to keep, whatever your metaphor is for life. But once you get in it and things start clicking, it is the ride of a lifetime. And yeah. I have in the past, I've tried to cling to that because I know that it's fleeting and I know it comes and goes. But these days I just welcome it with such a big warm hug. I'm like, oh, I'm back in the jet stream. It feels so good to be here. So I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's a huge, huge part of finding that lane and knowing that you're moving in the right direction. So we've talked about how you had some really awesome women in your life. Shout out to Buffy Burge for, pulling Anna aside, giving her that reassurance that she needed to keep things going. And when we get back from the break, I am just so interested to hear about Mind Body Paddle and everything you're doing to uplift women in the sport, bring balance and confidence on and off the water. So if anybody listening has questions for Anna on this next break, give us a call at 866-346-9141, and we'll take your live calls after the break. We'll be right back.
Follow us on Twitter at VoiceAmericaTRN. Get the lowdown on guests, new shows, and your favorites. That's VoiceAmericaTRN. Ready to find your wellness in the wilderness? Look no further than Hiking My Feelings. Through a combination of community and self-discovery, our programs are designed to give you the space and support to connect life's dots. If you're looking to figure out who you are underneath the stories you've been given and are ready to redesign the map of where you're headed with actionable steps and opportunities to dream big, we're here to walk alongside you. Whether you're a seasoned adventure enthusiast or brand new to the healing power of nature, we've got your back. Visit hikingmyfeelings.org today to download our free Trail Thoughts worksheets and learn more about Hiking My Feelings.
Sawyer is more than an outdoor company. Every Sawyer product you buy contributes to our common humanity, bringing Sawyer water filtration systems to people in need all around the world. In just 2022 alone, 260,000 households in over 45 countries received clean drinking water through Sawyer filters. Over the past 10 years, we've teamed up with over 140 charities in 80 countries to provide long-term, sustainable relief, domestically, internationally, and in disaster situations. Together, we're saving millions of lives. Thank you.
Have you ever spoken unkindly to yourself? Do you realize when you do? Are you ready to make changes, but find yourself completely paralyzed by the choices in front of you? We live in a hyper-connected, always-on world, and frankly, it's exhausting. Let's make time to disconnect from the distractions and reconnect with yourself. Hiking My Feelings exists to help people discover the healing power of nature. Kickstart your healing journey and grab a copy of the book that started our movement, Hiking My Feelings, Stepping into the Healing Power of Nature. Named one of Audible's best hiking audiobooks and available wherever books are sold. Visit hikingmyfeelings.org today to learn more.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You're listening to Wellness in the Wilderness with Sydney Williams. Have a question for Sydney and her guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Now back to the show with Sydney.
Welcome back to Wellness in the Wilderness. I'm your host, Sydney Williams, and I'm here with Anna Levesque from Mind Body Paddle. And before the break, we were talking about all the different inequities she was seeing in the sport of whitewater kayaking. And when we were getting ready to give a little break for our commercials, we were talking about the DVD series that she was producing and getting ready to release. So Anna, let's pick it up where we left off. How did the DVD release go?
It was amazing. My DVD called Girls at Play. This was back in 2004. It was a DVD, instructional DVD for women, with a lot of women telling their stories about whitewater kayaking, what was important to them. And it premiered at an event called the Whitewater Symposium. So there was a lot of my colleagues, like high-level paddlers, instructors, competitors at this gathering. And when I was standing in the room and my heart was beating full stop. I was just sweating. I was shaking. I was so nervous. And it is quite the experience to sit through and watch something that you've created and watch other people watch it for the first time. And, of course, I mentioned earlier that I can be pretty hard on myself. So I was, I was starting to see all the things that, I would have changed that and that. So I was really nervous. And then at the end, I received a standing ovation.
If I had sound effects, I'd be like, woo, standing ovation, air horns.
Yeah.
Burr, 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 burr.
I was shocked and I was so elated. I mean, I don't think it was such an incredible feeling to be. It wasn't just me being affirmed. It was the story I was telling, right? And to see so much support for women's stories was really amazing.
Yes. Oh, so 2004. So we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of your DVD series and these instructional videos and sharing these stories, getting this validation. Talk me through the last 18 years since you did that. How did that DVD series ladder up to what you're doing today?
Yeah. So when the DVD started getting distributed, I did an instructional tour of the US and Canada, supported by my amazing sponsors. And so I would offer free to low cost classes for women. And everywhere I went, especially the first several years, they were full. I mean, 30, 40 women showing up, which is a lot for whitewater kayaking. This is a niche within a niche, niche sport. And then women in whitewater is a niche. And so, of course, I had instructors to help me out. And from there, I started offering more retreat style, where we're all staying together so we can share our stories. We're sharing meals together. And, I stopped competing soon after that because I realized that my calling is really coaching and instruction and helping women with courage and confidence. And so, so there was that side, which was super affirming. And then the other side was I had pushback, right? And from both men and women, and excellent female paddlers would say, it's not okay, it's okay to cry on the river segment. Still to this day, Sydney, I Mind Body Paddle Facebook page just did a post about that like this week. And there's still, it's still one of the most engaged posts of this month, right? Women are still saying this still needs to be normalized. So there's still work to be done. And, there were folks who are like, it's not okay to cry in the river. You need to have your game face on. It's intense out there. You could die. You need to be fully in control, So there was a lack of emotional understanding and emotional intelligence. And then because I was advocating for women, not only in the confidence piece, but also advocating as an athlete. I've always been big of again, I've mentioned showing up as myself. And especially at that time, I felt like female athletes were, tended to be hypersexualized, or you had to be beautiful and really good if you wanted to get any, press. And I would also push back against that. And I remember at one press conference where I was pushing back at that, I was called the feminazi of kayaking, which I thought was, I don't know, I kind of laughed, but not. So that's the kind of atmosphere I was in.
That's so wild. So was your feminazi of kayaking, was that title bestowed upon you from a member of the press or just like somebody in the audience? What the heck?
A fellow pro kayaker.
Come on.
Yeah.
Do better, people. This isn't cool.
Yeah. Now, come on. This was in the, I'm still friends with this person and I paddle with them a lot. They're awesome. This was, again, I think personal growth and self-awareness has come a long way, and the culture has changed. Now there's several different, a handful of female-centered or for women who paddle events out there, and there are a lot more women who paddle. And I think in general in our culture, courage is. I think it's more accepted that courage is being scared and taking action anyway. And in order to be scared and take action anyway, that requires vulnerability. So vulnerability is not such a dirty word anymore.
Yes. Thank you,
right?
Brene Brown.
Exactly. So we've come a long way. And
Man.
So, yeah.
So tell me about how this evolved into Mind Body Paddle. So you do the DVDs, you're the feminazi of kayaking. Then, okay, obviously that's going to light a fire under your butt. You seem like a real go-getter, a lady that gets stuff done. What happened next? Like, how did that ladder up to Mind Body Paddle as it exists today?
Yeah, great question. So I started practicing yoga when I was competing to help me focus in the present moment and focus on what was important to me, and also for the benefits of reducing the risk of injury. And from yoga, I'm a 500-hour yoga teacher. And I also am an Ayurvedic health coach. Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga, and it is based on the elements of nature and essentially the philosophy that we are nature. And that when we can really sync with nature and circadian rhythm, that our health improves greatly. Sorry, I've got a little thing in my throat.
Well, I can certainly relate to the holistic side of this. And I think that adding that into and adding yoga, adding Ayurveda into any kind of practice, especially athletic, and especially these ones where we're spending time in nature and we are allowing ourselves to be part of it. I love that you called that out because that's the indigenous way of living before colonization, before we decided that we knew better than the people that have been stewarding the lands for thousands of years. That is how humanity existed. We ate seasonally, we ate locally, and it wasn't like going to the market. It was like foraging for food. So I love that you brought that into it, because on the water, on the trail, anywhere else you got to go outside, to be able to have those experiences and to connect deeply with the land on which you're recreating or living or working is a really foundational part of the experience of the sport that you're pursuing. Would you agree?
Yes, 100%. It's fully. And so that Ayurvedic health coaching and yoga really have helped me to grow in self-awareness and strategies in mind, body, and paddling, right? And how I approach the challenge of whitewater kayaking is how I approach other areas of my life. And that's how I work with my clients, right? Is to not compartmentalize everything, but to see where there's the thread and see how we can, have a holistic approach. And Yeah, a holistic approach, and can, like you said, connect with the river, because the river has so many teachings for us.
Oh my gosh, the wisdom out there has got to be just wild. I go paddleboarding and I love it deeply, but I imagine in a high pressure situation when you're doing some of these extreme things, going over waterfalls, with other people responsible for your life, and in some ways the lives of others, because you have to be in control of your vessel and yourself. All of that just really adds on to the experience. So if there's anybody listening that is curious about how to get started in whitewater rafting or kayaking, if there's somebody that's like, maybe they're in it and they're like nodding aggressively as they listen, maybe they're crying because they're thinking about all the times that they've experienced what you've spoken to. Do you have any advice for people that you wish that you had back in the day before you met Buffy, before you started talking to the other pro women in the sport?
Yeah, I want to say that having strong boundaries is healthy. So the river, when you look at a river, the river exists because of the banks, right? Because of its banks. Without the banks of the river, there would be no river. It would be a lake, or all the water would dissipate into the earth. And so within those banks, the river is able to flow and do its dance and be beautiful and creative. And so it's really healthy to set boundaries for yourself, both with yourself. So watch your self-talk is one of them. So having a boundary with yourself, there's freedom through boundaries. So when you notice that negative self-talk, like I said, I tended to be really hard on myself. When you notice that spiral, say, that's not true for me. Or even if you notice yourself saying, oh, that whitewater stuff, it looks so fun, but there's no way I could do it. Or there's no way I could stand up on a paddleboard. That's not true for me, right? And the other thing is boundaries with others, and creating that self-awareness and being strong in who you are and not being afraid to set those boundaries. And also the boundaries of, the other thing I would say is small, consistent actions over time lead to amazing results. So keep showing up for yourself. Keep showing up over and over and over for what you love. Back in the day when I spent my graduation money investing in my first kayak, some folks would have said, oh, that's a dumb idea. Why aren't you investing in something, that will actually help your future? Well, turns out that was the best investment in my future I could make.
I love that so
yourself.
much. Yes. And I'm a sucker for a metaphor and a visual. So thank you for equating boundaries to the banks of a river. For 2023, what do you have going on and where can people connect with you?
Yeah. So 2023, well, I've got several programs. What I want to invite our listeners, I offer a monthly free webinar every month. And actually, I'm offering two more. I'm offering two before the end of the year. So if you go to mindbodypaddle.com/webinars, you'll see the registration links, and also you'll be able to sign up for my weekly newsletter so you can find out what's coming up. But I've got several group programs on the water for women. I've got my Master Your Whitewater Mindset coming up in January, which is an 8-week live and virtual program. So I offer both, online coaching and in-person coaching, one-on-one and group, and I offer the holistic approach. So we look at all areas of life when you work with me, not just paddling.
I love that so much. So thank you so much, Anna, for joining us on this episode of Wellness in the Wilderness. Next week, we will be chatting with Arlette Land, the first woman to complete all 11 National Scenic Trails in America, and Sarah from Gossamer Gear, one of our other sponsors of the show. Arlette spent 19 years completing the 11 National Scenic Trails, with the Pacific Crest Trail being the first hike that would help her find her way back home to herself and design a lifestyle around the activities that brought her joy, made her feel strong, and connected with an incredible community. So you don't want to miss that conversation. Tune in next week. To keep the conversation going here, follow us on Instagram at Hiking My Feelings, and join the Hiking My Feelings family at family.hikingmyfeelings.org. The Hiking My Feelings family is our own private social network. Think Facebook, but without the ads, your odd uncle, or that chick you haven't talked to since middle school. It's a great place to find like-minded adventure buddy, learn more about our programs and retreats, and stay connected with the community. So we hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us for this week's dose of Wellness in the Wilderness. I sincerely hope that today's conversation was a breath of fresh air, and I look forward to connecting with you again next Tuesday at 1 o'clock Pacific on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Until next week, take care of yourself, take care of each other, dream big, and be kind. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on this week's show. We hope this episode has been a breath of fresh air for you and has inspired you to find your wellness in the wilderness. We will reconnect with nature and you again next week.
Since 1984, Sawyer has existed to support your wildest adventures. Learn about their advanced insect repellents and family of technical lightweight water filters at Sawyer.com.